Good. We're good to go. Good evening. Hi, Peter. How are you? Natalie, nice to see you again. Lucy, Keith, Glenda, Alex, Sally, Jamie. Hi, Sarah. Gonna give it just a few moments for people to turn up. Lynn, Birgit, Nat, Julia, Mark, Barbara. Great, glad you could make it, guys. Here we are, still in lockdown. Here we are, still in coronavirus times. John, so pleased to be here. He said hello twice. Sean, Scott, Rebecca, Tom, Julia, Becky. So you wanted to know about emptiness. You wanted to know about emptiness. So what I'm thinking of doing with this live stream is, if it goes well, if I don't completely muck it up, then I'll put it on YouTube to help grow our YouTube channel. So if you're watching this on YouTube, sorry you can't join in with the comments. You're looking into the past, and I'm talking into the future, which is pretty incredible. But anyway, you can join us for future live streams by going on to the House of Inner Tranquility Facebook page. If you don't have a Facebook page account, and I don't completely understand why you wouldn't, you can still observe a live stream without having an account. But if you want to join in, you'd have to have an account. But yeah, just head over to the House of Inner Tranquility Facebook page, and the times for live streams will be put up on there. Hello, Amy. Glad you could make it from Kansas. Liz, Marcus, Bodil. Okay, so let's get into this. So, what is emptiness? So, what did I say? What did I say in the? Having finally cottoned on to the truth that you can never fix samsara, which I think we've been sort of doing in Georgie. Hello. I think we've been doing in previous live streams that to death, really, haven't we? So, having realised that you can never fix samsara, what's next? To realise emptiness. Emptiness does not mean the absence of form, it means all forms are empty. I'll come on to why I made that distinction in a moment. Realising that there is nothing to crave for means the necessary condition for suffering is removed, and all that remains is, and this is quoting from the Lesser Discourse on Emptiness, which is found in Middle Length Sayings 3 in the Pali Canon. All that remains is this degree of disturbance, that is to say, the 6 sensory fields which, conditioned by life, are grounded on this very body itself. So, I want to discuss all of this, if you're up for that. If you're not up for that, well, what should we do instead? No, I'm going to do it anyway. Ebru, Linda, really glad you could make it. So, a lot of people who meditate, there's a lot of different kinds of meditation, and people practice concentration meditation, and I think they get confused. They interpret emptiness to mean the absence of things. So literally the absence of phenomena. And so they go into meditation and they get deeply concentrated, and what they perceive is that there's nothing there, which is in itself is inaccurate, because there's an awful lot going on mentally. But because there's no physical awareness of physical existence, they misinterpret that to mean emptiness. And the Buddha's teaching on emptiness is most definitely not nothingness. It's not. There's nothing nihilist about this teaching at all, and so it's a mistake that people fall into, and then they get scared, because the idea of meditation then they're faced with the apparent annihilation of the self, of entering a void and a kind of black nothingness. Well, if it's black, then it's somethingness, because it's got a colour at the very least. So there's this tendency then to get very scared and think that somehow, just by sitting quietly in a chair with your eyes closed, that somehow something's going to get annihilated, and it's all very confusing. But and in discussing emptiness, we must also bear in mind what the purpose of this teaching is. That the purpose of the teaching, as I've indicated, is the realization of emptiness means that you realize fundamentally there is nothing to crave for. There's no purpose in craving for life to be different than it is. The passionate response is removed. There's no passionate resistance, and the fundamental necessary condition for the arising of suffering is eradicated. So the suffering is eradicated, and that's, we're not trying to annihilate anything other than the causes of suffering, which is craving. So, and craving is a mental activity that we perform. So that's all that gets removed, but one does so by realizing emptiness. So so what I thought I'd do is read a little bit from the Lesser Discourse on Emptiness. I'm not going to read the whole thing. For one reason, obviously it's copyrighted, so I just want to make the case that I'm reading the Middle Length Sayings, Volume 3, translated by I.B. Horner and published by the Pali Text Society, and I'm claiming fair use, given that it's I'm commenting on the text and I'm not seeking any kind of personal advantage through doing so, financial or otherwise. So there is just one paragraph that I'd really like to read, and as I go through it, I'll just try to comment on it, to try to explain exactly what it is that we're talking about here, so to help you realise that it's something that actually you know and understand in your own experience, and then we can take it on, having got the necessary form and the structure to it, we can then take it on and look at it in its more subtle aspects. So the sutta is brought about, as they often were, through a question from the Buddha's personal assistant Ananda, who one of his... Okay, hello Simon, hello Robert, hello Olivia. We're going through a little bit of the Lesser Discourse on Emptiness. So Ananda, Buddha's personal assistant, would just at the right time, he'd just ask the Buddha a question as a way of getting the Buddha to do a discourse. And so the question Ananda asks the Buddha is if he's understood it right when the Buddha said, I, Ananda, through abiding in emptiness, am now abiding in the fullness thereof. And he hopes that he heard this properly, and the Buddha confirms that he did. So there's an immediate association of enlightenment with emptiness. Emptiness is the fullest enlightenment is the fullest realization of emptiness. Okay, but emptiness is not nothing, which I hope I'll come on to explain for you. And so the Buddha then starts to explain what emptiness is by giving an example, and the example is of a monk wanting to find some solitude, and so he leaves the village because the village has lots of disturbances through people milling around and all the activities of the village itself. So he goes into the forest, and this is what he says. Even so, Ananda, a monk not attending to the perception of village, not attending to the perception of human beings, attends to solitude grounded on the perception of forest. His mind is settled with, pleased with, set on, and freed in the perception of forest. So what's the monk done? He's escaped the village. He's sitting down perhaps at the foot of a tree in the forest, and he has the perception in front of him of a forest. He does not have the perception of a village, with the noise of the village. He doesn't have the perception of human beings going about their business. They are disturbances, and his mind is not disturbed by the perception of human beings and the village. Right? Fairly straightforward, yeah? And he comprehends thus: the disturbances there might be resulting from the perception of village do not exist here. The disturbances there might be resulting from the perception of human beings do not exist here. There is only this degree of disturbance, that is to say, solitude grounded on the perception of forest. Yeah? So he's aware that his perception is of a forest. He knows there's no perception of the village and all the disturbances of the village and the people. Okay. He comprehends this perceiving is empty of the perception of village. He comprehends this perceiving is empty of the perception of human beings. Okay, so he's aware that the solitude and the peace that he's experiencing is because of the absence of the disturbance brought about by the perception of the village and the people. Where did I get to? Oh yeah. He regards that which is not there as empty of it. Now that's a confusing thing to say, but I'll try to explain that. But in regard to what remains there, he comprehends that being this is. Thus, Ananda, this comes to be for him a true, not a mistaken, utterly purified realization of emptiness. Okay. What is required in order to know that the perception of forest is empty of the perception of village or the perception of human beings? There has to be the conceptualization of both the village and human beings. So there has to be a conceptual understanding of the village and the human beings, and the knowledge that those perceptions are not arising. That's what he means when he says, in regards to that which is not there as empty of it. His experience of the forest being empty of the village and the people is dependent upon the conceptualization of there being village and people. It's just they are absent. And that's really important to understand as we go deep into Vipassana meditation, that you don't lose the ability to conceive of the conventional world. You know that even though you understand that ultimately we're going to reach the point of understanding that forms are empty, there is still the awareness of forms. It's just there's the understanding that reality is empty of those, in exactly the same way that the perception of a forest is empty of the perception of the village and the perception of the human beings. But you have to have that conceptual understanding of village and human beings in order to see that this experience is empty of them. Does that make sense? Because that's really important to understand. All right. And then the Buddha concludes that thus, Ananda, this comes to be for him, the monk, a true, not mistaken, utterly purified realization of emptiness. It's not the end of the path by any means, but the monk in that instance has understood the concept. He's understood the teaching. He's understood the structure of what emptiness actually is. He has to retain a conceptual model of the world, but he knows that reality is empty of it. That's what this is saying. Does this make sense? I hope it does. So let's try another example. As I'm sitting here, and as you're sitting wherever you are located in a city or a town. You're definitely located in a country. And as you look about wherever you are right now, can you see your country? Can you see the town that you're in? Can you see your city? Or is your perception of whatever room you're in at the moment, so I'm in my attic, the attic space, the nice tidy attic, the attic. So I'm in the attic, so there's the perception of attic. I'm also in Bradford and Avon, but there's no perception of Bradford and Avon. There's no perception of any other people. So as I sit here, there is a conceptual recognition of Bradford and Avon and the people in Bradford and Avon, but as I sit here, the perceiving, the experience is empty of Bradford and Avon, it's empty of the people of Bradford and Avon. The disturbances created by perceiving Bradford and Avon and perceiving human beings do not exist here. There is peace, there is solitude in the absence of those things. But I have to retain the conceptual understanding in order to know that this experience is empty of those things. It's brilliant. This sutta is absolutely brilliant. It's just so amazing. Shall we take it on a little bit further? Okay, so we start getting into Vipassana meditation. This is where we introduce the idea of the 6 sensory fields. So, in my experience, I shouldn't say my if we're talking about ultimate reality, but the actualness of this experience is made up of 6 sensory fields. Okay, so there's seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and mind as the 6th sense. Okay, everything that is happening in actuality is to be found within one or other of those sensory fields. Nothing lies outside of those sensory fields in terms of actual moment by moment conscious experiencing. Okay, so this moment. So each sensory field is made up of a sense object, the sensitive matter of the sense media, and the consciousness which arises, which knows that object mediated through the sense base. So there is shape and colour, and there is seeing, and there is the sensitive matter of eye that registers the signals. There's sound, there's hearing, mediated through the sense base of ear. There's smelling, so there's the things smelt, there's the odour, there's the smelling, and that's the sensitive matter of the sense base of the nose. There's the taste, there's the conscious tasting, and there's the sensitive matter of the tongue, which is the sense base. There are tactile sensations, heat, cold, hard, soft, and so forth. There's the knowing of touch, which is the consciousness, and there's the sensitive matter of the body, the nervous system, which registers those tactile contacts. And then you have the base of mind, upon which thoughts, perceptions, concepts, feelings, memories arise. And there's mind consciousness, which knows the thought, knows the feeling, knows the perception. Yeah? That's heavy, Marcus? I don't think it's heavy. Anyway, so you've got these 6 sensory fields. Okay, and everything that goes to make up our conscious experience is to be found within these 6 sensory fields. Alright, so we practice mindfulness. We practice mindful investigation. We learn to note the arising of any object in any of those 6 sensory fields. So it's shape and colour, sound, taste, touch, smell, thought, etc. And with each arising of each object, there's the conscious knowing of it. So you have these 6 sensory fields. And what we do is we look at each moment of experience and observe that every component part in any of those 6 sensory fields is entirely transient. It arises, it passes away. And because it arises and passes away, you can't grasp it. It's fundamentally unsatisfactory. It arises and disappears. And we also recognize that without any one of those components in any one of the 6 sensory fields, a moment of experience cannot arise. So there's this burgeoning understanding of conditionality, that one thing only arises because another thing exists. With the ceasing of one thing, that other thing which had arisen, that too passes away. And so we come to the Buddha's statement, there is this degree of disturbance. That is to say, the 6 sensory fields, which conditioned by life, are grounded on this very body itself. So the whole thing about conditionality is we have these 5 physical senses and mind, and they are grounded on this very body itself, and it's because there are those sensory sense bases that allows for this conscious experiencing to occur. Okay, and he's saying that's real, that's actual, that is what is actual in the world, in experience. Okay, so then we're placed in a very difficult situation, because as we normally understand life, there's a whole bunch of other objects. There's lampshades, there are Buddha rupas, there are candles, there are glasses of water. Cheers. Where do they fit in? So what happens as we are practicing Vipassana and we're learning to observe what is actually taking place, we see that there's this dichotomy. There's the dichotomy between what we're seeing and the world as we ordinarily understand it, the world of apparently separate objects and things. And so what we have to do is we have to apply the exercise of observing transience and noting things. We have to apply it to everything. So for instance, it appears very much like there is a glass of water here which is separate from me. So we ordinarily think of this as, well, I'm over here and the glass is over there. I perceive something which is separate from me, and I call it glass of water, right? But the more we look at actually what's taking place, the more we realise that in terms of the 6 sensory fields, there's shape and colour. In terms of the eye, in terms of hearing, oh, I must sample that, that's really good. In terms of sound, there's a sound and there's hearing. It's cold to touch, so there's the tactile sensation of coldness. There's not a lot of taste, and there's no smell. And then in terms of the 6th sensory field, there are mental objects arising, one of which is perception. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because where does the perception of a glass of water stop and the glass of water begin? And what you discover is, the more you practice looking at the 6 sensory fields and breaking down experience into the true components, is you realise there aren't 2 realities. There isn't the reality of this glass of water which exists separate from the perception of it. What you realise is the perception of the glass of water is one of the fundamental building blocks that goes to create this experience. Consciousness, in terms of seeing, of hearing, of touch, are also fundamental components that go to make up this experience. So there isn't actually a glass of water which is separate from the rest of experience. If there were no seeing consciousness, if there were no sound hearing consciousness, if there was no tactile consciousness, there would be no experience, and therefore there would be no perception arising of a glass of water. And that life gets very fascinating when you see that. So to bring it back to the Buddha's realization of emptiness, his realization of emptiness is that there is no disturbance from the perception of a glass of water. There is no duality of a reality of a glass of water and then me as the separate observer and perceiver of the glass of water. There is only one reality, which is the six sensory fields, which is the only disturbance there is, and that there is no glass of water. But, and this is the brilliant thing, there is the conception of a reality of a glass of water. Because without it, you wouldn't know that emptiness, that this experience is empty of the experience or the perception of a glass of water. It's so brilliant, it's so clever. So you can only have emptiness if you have the conceptualization of form. I'll try to put this another way for you before you can then start asking all your questions. So for the enlightened mind, there's the complete understanding of the illusory nature of the glass of water. There really isn't a glass of water here at all. What there is perception, sound, touch, shape and colour. But what is retained is the conceptualization of the glass of water, which, if you like, is nested within the overall reality of the six sensory fields. So in mind, there is the conceptualization of the glass of water, but it is completely understood that there is, in actuality, no glass of water, even though it appears as though there is. Oh, you're all still with me, that's good. Oh dear. So, we can then start moving it about and say, well, what else is not actually here? And this is where it gets really, really interesting, if it wasn't interesting enough for you. So what else is not here? There are literally only the six sensory fields. And the enlightened mind realizes that there is only this degree of disturbance. That is to say, the six sensory fields which, conditioned by life, are grounded on this very body itself. So the conventional reality is, as it were, nested within the reality of the six sensory fields, but it doesn't have its own separate reality. So there is no duality at all. So you realize, so the realization of non-duality is the realization of emptiness, which is the realization of freedom from craving, because there is literally nothing to crave for. There is nothing to crave to be different than it is. So going back, if I may, just for a moment, I wanted to leave this subject well alone tonight, but going back to all the riots and trouble about this and that that's been going on recently, where is all of that? As you sit there now, isn't it the case that your experience at this moment is empty of the perception of riots, is empty of the perception of coronavirus, is empty of the perception of whatever else it might be? But you have to retain the conception of those things in order to know that your experience is empty of them. So that conceptual reality has its place, but what the enlightened mind understands is all those things are empty of any inherent existence. So all the politics, all the philosophy, all the psychology, it's all empty. All the football, all the films, all the computer games, empty. I'm listing all the things in my life. You've probably got a lot more grown-up things that you're listing. All of them are empty. The only things which are actual are the 6 sensory fields. Yeah. Any thoughts? I mean, I've literally just done a lecture there for you. Please, please. What do you think? Any questions? Any observations? So once you've understood the premise, all you have to do is keep noting any element from those 6 sensory fields: thought, perception, a memory. Becky, that's quite cheeky, because I literally could, but then you could watch this back. Can you just run that over that again? Sean, does this then lead to skillful versus unskillful action? Sean, thank you. In a way, this is beyond skillful and unskillful. My head has exploded. Georgie, I don't believe you, because if your head had exploded, how come you're able to write that comment? Taking you literally, sorry. David, could you expand on how states of mind fit in? I think you've got to keep things as simple as possible. Not get too caught up in trying to to gain a conceptual understanding of it, but rather keep on watching. I mean, there are a whole raft of, I think a better way of putting it is there is a whole constellation of mental concomitants, mental components that go to make up any experience. Attention, energy, one-pointedness of mind, evenness of mind. So, and all of those have to be working in combinations for any kind of conscious experience to occur. So I'm not quite sure what it is that you want expanding. I would say just keep it as simple as you can and just note what's there. Natalie, you said to retain a conceptualization of the water, but surely you would retain it anyway. Well, no, that retaining happens naturally. I mean, we have to orientate ourselves in the conventional world. So, the Buddha doesn't instantaneously become an imbecile the moment he becomes enlightened. He doesn't disappear in a puff of blue smoke, and he doesn't become like an innocent baby lying on his back, unable to help himself. It's like I say, we're literally just sitting down in a chair. Nothing is going to change in terms of the way life unfolds. It's just our understanding of the way life unfolds is the change. So conceptualization is not self, you see. So it just arises as a natural part of what is. But it's now that you're not confusing the illusory world of objects. You see the emptiness inherent in all objects. Yeah. but you can still find your way around the world. Linda, are you sure this can be understood eventually without the high IQ? Yes, and I'm living proof of that, Linda. I'm not joking, nor am I. This is not about being clever. It's so complicated to put across, but you are living this. Everyone is living this all the time. It's just you're ignoring it. And it's just literally, this is empty of any inherent reality. It's not saying there's nothing there. What's there is shape and colour. What's there is, look, it's obvious. Shape and colour. Sound. Obviously you can't get the tactile sensations, but nonetheless. And there is the perception arising. That's a glass of water. It is literally just looking at this. Marcus, it makes perfect sense when you say it. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's the Buddha's genius. I'm just trying to help make sense of it and get you looking at all this. I mean, that was why I wanted to do this kind of live stream. You know, you're all students of Dhamma. You want to come to know and understand. We've got to get out of, as Buddhist meditators, we've got to let go of all this stuff that's going on in the world, because it is all actually empty of any inherent reality. It truly, truly is. And the Buddha's path, the insight path, the higher teaching, is the way to come to realise that. But all you have to do, I'm only giving you this for information, you can forget all about it, but all you have to do is be prepared to watch, look, investigate, explore, keep coming back to mindfulness, keep coming back to that's black, that's blue, that's green, that's pink. And each time you move your attention, whatever shape or colour that was in the visual field is lost, and there's another one arises, and you go, oh, it's transient. And you just keep watching. This. A while back, I had a strange experience of having left my dad's house, driving home, and sensed that my dad, his home, our time together didn't exist now in the car driving home. Yes, I mean, it's not to say that there aren't going to be times when we're discombobulated by what we discover. And one of the amazing things that you discover is that you start to realise how flimsy, how ephemeral life is, and yet it just adds to the mystery, because it still all holds together, pretty much. It pretty much all carries on holding together, giving you the sense of this solid, grounded universe of which you're a part, which is separate from you. But so you have this kind of cognitive dissonance for a while, where you're seeing it in one way and then you're seeing it in the other, and you go, oh. And gradually, truth wins out, and illusion is seen for what it is. Lynn, so can you say it is empty of the experience as well as the perception of, say, coronavirus? So can the word experience replace the word perception, or is that inaccurate? So, and any experience will contain perception. Any experience. Okay. So the experience, so there is a perception, that's why I use the word conceptualize. So for the monk sitting at the root of the tree in the forest, his experience is missing the perception of the village. It's missing the perception of the human beings. So he says, this experience is empty of the experience of being in a village, the experience of human beings, which cause disturbance. So this solitude is grounded on emptiness, the emptiness of those things. But again, the point is that he has to have that concept to be able to establish that his experience is empty. Yeah. So we don't lose that conceptual map of the world that's always being updated with new information, like things like coronavirus. And that is the joy. seeing emptiness is joyful. It's because when you finally see it, it's like everything, even the merest thing like this, becomes, its emptiness is deeply significant. Its emptiness is gorgeous. Everything is empty. It's like it is literally like you're in a cosmic play, and we're just playing. I must come across like a madman sometimes. And I don't get it. I mean, I don't care. Sorry, I read Georgie's comment, and that came out instead of what I was going to say. Ah, I get it. Great, brilliant. Sean, this is a very good question, Sean. If this is beyond skillful actions, why then should one focus on skillful versus unskillful actions if they are both empty? Before enlightenment, you want to be really, really careful about what kind of actions you perform, because your actions have results, right? Because you don't see them as empty. After enlightenment, you've cut through the roots that give rise to unwholesome states of mind, which then give rise to unskillful actions. So it really doesn't matter anymore. You want to limit. Through experience, you want to understand what unwholesome actions are, and you want to limit acting upon unwholesome states as much as you can, because that's what's going to generate the meditative space, the solitude, psychological solitude, which allows you to look closely at life going on, and it means that your future is going to be reasonably pleasant. And then subsequent to coming to the true, the highest realization of emptiness, the complete realization of emptiness, then it literally doesn't matter anymore. I hope that helps, Sean. Sally, is it like the glass of water is more of an interaction than a thing in itself? The way I like to put it is that it is the emergent reality. So you have the play, the conditioned and conditioning play of all the components of the six sensory fields. So each moment, all that's actually happening is the play of these six sensory fields, and that includes mind and perception and conceptualizing and so forth. And out of all that interweaving comes the emergent, this shadow-like, ephemeral. I mean, saying that it's conventional reality is like a rainbow, because we get that a rainbow is so insubstantial, it's so ephemeral, it's not really a thing. Yeah. And we know it's just the product of conditions, and we know what those conditions are. It's light, it's water, and the play of that. Does that help, Sally? I hope so. Marcus, I love the idea that all things are intrinsically nested in unfolding reality, waiting to come into existence. And their coming into existence it's playful. See, this is the whole thing. This is why it's so sad that people are so caught up in the world, because it's only meant to be playful. Enlightenment is playful. You realise that existence is playful. It was never meant to be there. Well, I mean, you can't really say that it was never meant to be. It is what it is. And this is why we come to this school of the human realm, to do this work, to come to see that actually the universe is just messing around. Sue, as you explain this, it makes absolute sense, but my grasp of non-duality is so slippery. As I try to look harder, it's difficult and clunky again. Sue, don't try to grasp, because you can't. And people say that they come in and out of non-dual consciousness. I wonder what they mean. Do they mean the emptiness, which is the apparent lack of any phenomena? You cannot conceptualize non-duality, not really. So I'd say don't worry. Just how do you have faith in the Buddha's teaching? Do you have faith in meditation? Has practicing meditation brought value? Has it helped bring understanding of how life works and therefore lessened the amount of suffering experience? In which case, keep going. Keep learning how to put aside hindrances. Keep entering into mindfully noting ultimate phenomena. Again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And put all your eggs in that basket rather than trying to conceptualize it. Because you'll never be able to throw your hat on it in that way. I think Alan used the analogy of trying to fill a sieve with water, and it's not. It's the way that you fill the sieve with water is to throw the sieve into the sea, and so we have to let go and just really explore ultimate reality again and again and again, and the true realization of emptiness, the true realization of non-duality. It's what's left after you've got rid of all the craving for life to be different. Peter, see, this is really interesting, and this is what I'd really encourage you to think about this. Peter says, I do seem to completely grasp this conceptually, however it seems right now it seems a million miles away from a genuine experience of non-duality. And this is what I would really, really like people to let go of the idea of having a genuine experience of non-duality, because you are experiencing it all the time. And if you say to yourself, I'm a million miles away from where I want to be, where does that mean that you are now, psychologically and spiritually? If somebody says, I really want to be happy, one day I want to be happy, I hope to be happy, where does that mean that they are spiritually and psychologically now? It means that they have to perceive themselves as being unhappy. And we need to get away from telling ourselves that we're not clever enough for this, or we're not spiritual enough for this, or it all seems a million miles away from the likes of me being able to, because that's the ego playing its game. That's Mara playing its game, keeping us bound in the mistaken view of the world. Jackie James, who co-founded the centre with Alan, talked about having to hold two different attitudes in your mind at the same time as you follow this path. The one is, I don't care how long this takes. This could take lifetimes, and I'm prepared to give it my everything. I'm prepared to go along and do this for as long as it takes. And on the same time, you need to have the attitude of complete openness, complete willingness to look at what's actually taking place, because at any given moment there could be an insight, and seeing how life is actually operating. So we've got to get away from this attitude of saying either it's I'm not good enough, it's not for the likes of me, I'm not clever enough, or it's it all seems like a million miles away at the moment. It just doesn't work. Natalie, I see what you're saying about retaining the conceptualization now. Okay, good. Matthew, glad you could join us. Hi Paul, how is it that the knowledge that all objects are just made out of sense perception, well, and other things, they're made of shape and colour and consciousness, and how does it end craving and restlessness? Well, actually, in the sutta that I was quoting, the Buddha does talk about how the monk that realizes his enlightenment perceives what we call the cankas. Do you remember the cankas from your time as a monk? The asawas of ignorance, becoming, sense pleasures, And he sees that his reality is empty of those things too. So it's the observation that it's the wisdom that comes from the repeated observation of transience, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self, which leads to non-grasping. The non-grasping leads to the fruitions. So at the culmination of the four fruitions, after that there is no craving for anything other than perhaps the realization of enlightenment itself. So it's only really at the end of the fourth path. So it's the craving, the restlessness is eroded. The tendency towards that is eroded through the observation of the truth that there are no things to crave for. So literally, if someone's looking in the right place, in the right way, there's nothing they can do about it, they will stop craving eventually. But it needs repeated observation. And it's not so much the development of wisdom, it's the eradication of the tendency to ignore reality. Sean, it's certainly a long road. It is, but how far down it is anyone? You know, I didn't know growing up how my life would turn out. Oh my goodness. You know, I had a real trouble at careers advice at school. If only somebody said, "Well, we've plotted your character pool, done all the tests, and we think you ought to become a Buddhist monk." Nobody, careers advice did not come up with that. I think they said something, I don't know, I can't remember what they suggested, but I thought it was a really bad idea, whatever it was. So how on earth could I have predicted how things were going to unfold? So and this is why Jackie's advice is so pertinent and so brilliant. On the one hand, yes, accepting that it's a long road means that you have patience. Having patience means you're more able just to look at what's unfolding because you're not so goal-orientated. Looking at what's unfolding, then there's the possibility of insight, of wisdom, of true knowledge coming to be at any moment. So accept that it's a long road, but also accept that you're quite a long way down it. If you're able to withstand an hour of this, that suggests to me that you're quite spiritually mature. Becky. Oh, Linda first. You are a bit mad, but I like it. Good. Glad. Glad we're both reading the same book there, Linda. Becky, would it be right to say that for the conceptualization and emergent reality of tree to exist, there needs to be a psychophysical process operating the six sensory fields? Without a me, is there a tree? Where in experience we have the conceptualization me? Where in experience is that? Where in the six sensory fields is that to be located? Georgie, I love that you say we are experiencing non-duality now. It makes me feel like I don't have to grasp for anything. No, you don't. If you understand, even intellectually, that we're experiencing non-duality now, it means you don't have to go chasing something, but what you do have to do is explore. That's the key. It's exploring, investigating. All right, so shape and colour, thought, feeling, sound, tactile sensation. It's exploring, noting as you go. That's the key. I'm reading Jackie's book, The Purpose of Life. I'm finding it really reflects what you were saying in the live streams, thankfully. Georgie, I'm very relieved to hear that. Becky, in the mind. So there's a concept. So the mind deals in concepts. So it's purely the concept of me. So to go back to what you're saying, the psychophysical process is not me. The psychophysical process is the psychophysical process. Nothing is operating the six sensory fields. The six sensory fields are, but they're not solid and unchanging. They're arising and passing away due to conditions all the time. Now, as we were saying earlier, to know that reality is empty of self, there has to be the conceptualization of self. So the conceptualization of self has its place, but it doesn't relate to anything absolutely real or integral. There isn't anyone steering the ship. It's all just unfolding. It's like, Marcus, it's like having a spiritual lottery ticket. Your numbers could come up at any moment if you pay attention closely enough. It's actually better than that, because there's no luck involved. There's no luck involved. Insight will arise if the conditions are right. So if somebody takes it upon themselves to learn how to set aside hindrances, to live a reasonable life, to set aside hindrances, and learn where it is that they have to, what it is they have to pay attention to, then they're putting in place all the right conditions. And the Buddha's famous analogy, is it an analogy or illustration of, if you eat and drink, it is inevitable that you have to obey the call of nature. The call of nature. It's inevitable, isn't it? By the same token, if you keep watching transients, you have to come to realize emptiness. It's the same principle. If you keep on noting transients, you will become enlightened. So really, it's not luck. It's that you finally cottoned on to what was truly in your best interests. And you said, everything else, experiencing this life dualistically has not brought me any real lasting peace and happiness. I keep trying to control everything, but everything gets out from under my control. I keep trying to find fulfillment. I never get there. Okay, there must be another aspect to life. You start investigating the Buddha's teaching, you start putting it into practice, and you come to realize the truth of things for yourself. Because it's not deterministic. It's not absolutely deterministic. You can change your mind. You can change your understanding of what is in your own best interest. And when you do that, and then you follow the path wholeheartedly with humility and wholeheartedness and humility, they're two conditions that you need. With patience, with perseverance, you find your way, and those insights arise. Peter. So when we're noting in meditation or everyday life, and in that noting there is no concept of me, is that an experience of non-duality? No, you haven't understood. I'm sorry. The concept of me can arise. The concept of me is not me. The concept of self is not self. Don't go looking for an experience of non-duality, Peter. Note. Just keep noting. Marcus, yes, the path we tread is choosing your numbers. Yes, okay. Scott, you've made that so simple. Thank goodness. Have I though, or have I made things more complicated? if let me find. I know you'll be able to look at the sutta, which is the lesser discourse on emptiness. I will get a link to the Access to Insight website for you if you don't have a copy of Middle Length Sayings 3. Access to Insight. The ego can sometimes trick you into thinking a decision it made for you was you. Well, Sean, a good point. I mean, don't forget that in conventional terms, it's perfectly all right to take ownership of your decisions. But when we look in ultimate terms, you see that choice, decision, action is the result of conditions and is itself a condition for then subsequent conditions to arise, and that there is, in ultimate terms, no self in it. And this is one of the mistakes I think people make, is believing that somehow what's going to happen is that you won't be aware of yourself doing stuff. But it's not. Every component that goes to make up an experience has to be there. That includes self-view. It's just that there is the realization that self-view is empty of self. There's no self in it. Because I need to know that I'm not you, Sean. It's really important for me to conduct myself in the world knowing that I'm not you. Now, where is this here link? Let's put emptiness in there. See what comes up. Chula Sanyata Sutta. There we are. No, that's not it. Why did they do that to me? Sorry, this isn't a really. Oh, okay, you've got it. Sarah has put a link up. Is that the actual link to the lesser discourse on emptiness, Sarah? I'm not going to click on it just in case I lose this live stream. So yeah, so it looks like you can go online and get the Pali Text Society version of the sutta, which is great. Mark, thank you, Mark. Mark has also come up trumps with a. If that's the right one, is that the right one? Because the one oh no, it's arrived now. It's come up now. Yeah, okay, good. All right. So yeah, so that's all right, Sarah. People will be able to find it. So the point of doing this live stream on this subject was that I wanted to just get us back on track, because it's so easy to get so caught up in the things of the world and just become obsessed with all of that, and yet it turns out it's all empty. And really wanting people to, if you're interested, if you want to know what this actually is, then you really do have to. One of the choices you make is to become less enamored with the world, less caught up in the machinations of politics and people trying to change the world, because there's literally no end to it. That's not the way out of suffering, although I appreciate that people do it because they believe it is. But if you're a Buddhist meditator intent on understanding the Buddha's higher teaching, you can't afford to allow yourself to be overwhelmed by all of that, because it turns out it's all empty. Literally, reality is what is unfolding now. It is the actualness of actuality. It is this. And all that political stuff is it cannot be found in this experience other than as a concept in the mind. Oh, thanks, Liz. I'm really glad about that. It's just where you are with the meditation. You're doing really well, and all you have to do is keep going with what you've been doing, and any kind of doubt issues will be resolved. Doubt is one of the fetters that bind us, and so as we go through the insight path, the fetters try to rebind us in the old way of seeing things. So doubt keeps nagging away. You sure you want to be doing this? No, it's not right. It's not natural. Don't do it. Jason. Thanks, Jason. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know what anyone else made of it, but brilliant, guys. All right, let's leave it there for tonight, shall we? I'm glad you're finding them helpful. I really enjoy it, doing it like this. It's like not having to actually be with you. This perceiving is empty of the perception of Buddhist meditators staring at me. Excellent. Great. Excellent, guys. Yep, I think we're there. So take all of this with a pinch of salt. Something to bear in mind. But really, if you can hone in on noting. Doesn't matter how complex all this idea of emptiness is. When you finally realise what it is, you'll go, how could I not have seen that? But until then, it will appear very, very strange. So you just live with that and you just keep practicing. Yeah, it is a very difficult topic to discuss. So the realisation of it is simple, so simple. But to talk about it does make it very complex. And that's what makes the Buddha's Sutta such a work of genius, because of the way he sets it out. Alright, guys. I think I'm done. I think I need to go and lie down. So I'll have a little think and then let you know what we'll talk about at the weekend. Until then, have a great week and keep noting transience. Alright, guys. Till the next time.